In this episode, we're going to focus on the part of security leadership that makes change safer and faster at the same time: coordination and clean tracking. Many security problems are not caused by a lack of knowledge about controls, but by the fact that people do not know what is changing, who approved it, who owns it, or what the current status is when things start to go wrong. When coordination is weak, teams work from different assumptions, changes pile up without clear accountability, and incidents become harder to contain because nobody can quickly answer basic questions. When documentation and tracking are messy, the organization loses its memory, which means it repeats mistakes and struggles to prove what decisions were made. The goal is not to create heavy bureaucracy. The goal is to create a clear, lightweight system where the right stakeholders are involved at the right times and where change information is easy to find and reliable. By the end, you should understand what clean change coordination looks like and how tracking supports security outcomes without becoming a drag on delivery. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. Coordination is the practice of aligning people, decisions, and actions across teams so a change can be implemented safely and predictably. In a simple environment, one team might own everything, but most real environments are distributed, meaning infrastructure, application, platform, operations, security, and business stakeholders each own pieces of the system. A change that touches identity, data flow, network exposure, or monitoring will often span multiple owners, and each owner has constraints and risks they care about. Beginners sometimes assume coordination is simply informing everyone, but informing is not the same as coordinating, because coordination requires clarity about who must decide, who must act, and who must verify. When coordination is missing, work stalls because everyone waits, or work proceeds unsafely because people assume someone else handled the risk. Security leaders add value by creating predictable touchpoints where stakeholders can align on impact, timing, and safeguards before changes occur. This reduces last-minute conflict and reduces the chance that a change introduces exposure that nobody noticed until it becomes an incident. Clean documentation begins with understanding why documentation is a security control rather than a paperwork ritual. Documentation provides a durable record of what changed, why it changed, what risk was considered, and what safeguards were expected. During an incident, documentation helps responders understand what the system should look like and what recent changes might have caused the problem. During audits and governance reviews, documentation helps leadership confirm that risk decisions were made deliberately rather than accidentally. Over time, documentation helps new team members inherit systems responsibly because they do not have to guess why a sensitive configuration exists or why an exception was granted. A beginner misconception is that security documentation must be long to be valuable, but the opposite is often true. The most useful documentation is concise, consistent, and structured enough that people can quickly locate critical facts. Clean documentation is about reducing confusion and enabling faster decisions, not about creating a library nobody reads. Tracking is the system that keeps documentation alive by showing status, ownership, and timelines. A change record that exists but is not tracked becomes stale, and stale records create false confidence because people assume the record reflects reality. Tracking provides the operational view of where work stands, such as whether a change is proposed, approved, in progress, validated, or closed. It also shows whether required steps, like security impact analysis or verification, have occurred. Beginners sometimes think tracking is mainly for project managers, but tracking is essential for security because it prevents hidden drift and it prevents work from disappearing into private conversations. When a vulnerability fix depends on a change, tracking shows whether the fix is moving or stuck, and if stuck, why. Tracking also supports accountability because it makes ownership visible and reduces the chance that issues remain unresolved simply because they are uncomfortable. Clean tracking is therefore part of a reliable security program because it turns intentions into observable progress. A major coordination challenge is identifying the right stakeholders, because involving too few people creates blind spots, while involving too many people creates delays. The right stakeholders are the people who own impacted assets, the people who can authorize risk trade-offs, and the people who must operate or support the system after the change. For security-relevant changes, that often includes identity owners when access patterns change, data owners when sensitive data flows change, operations when availability and rollback are at stake, and security when monitoring, detection, and control expectations must be verified. Beginners often think the security team should always be at the center of every decision, but a more mature view is that security should ensure the right decision-makers are engaged rather than trying to own every decision. This reduces bottlenecks and increases speed because decisions happen at the right level. It also reduces friction because teams feel respected and because security is seen as enabling coordination rather than controlling everything. When stakeholder identification is consistent, teams can predict who will be involved and plan changes accordingly. Coordination also requires clear decision rights, meaning clarity about who can approve what and when escalation is required. If decision rights are unclear, change discussions become debates that drag on because nobody feels authorized to decide. This is especially common when a change involves exceptions, such as temporarily accepting a risk because a full fix cannot be delivered on time. In those cases, the organization needs a clear path for risk acceptance that moves the decision to the appropriate level of leadership. A beginner misunderstanding is to treat escalation as punishment, but escalation is often a healthy mechanism that ensures risk is accepted by the people accountable for the consequences. Clear decision rights also support speed because routine changes can be approved quickly without unnecessary meetings, while high-risk changes receive deeper review. When decision rights are defined, coordination becomes smoother because people know what they are responsible for and what they are not. This reduces the emotional friction that often accompanies security conversations because uncertainty about authority often feels like personal conflict. Clean change documentation should capture a few essential elements consistently so that different teams can interpret records the same way. The record should state what is being changed, why it is being changed, what systems and data are affected, and who owns the change. It should also capture the security impact analysis outcome, including what risks were identified and what safeguards are required. It should capture timing, such as planned implementation windows, and whether the change is phased or full. It should capture rollback and recovery considerations, because those determine how safely the organization can retreat if the change behaves unexpectedly. It should also capture verification expectations, meaning how the organization will confirm that the change did what it intended and did not weaken critical controls. This sounds like a lot, but when written cleanly, it can be compact because it focuses on the decisions and facts that matter. Beginners sometimes confuse clean documentation with verbose documentation, but clean documentation is concise and structured, which makes it far more useful under pressure. Tracking cleanly also requires keeping statuses meaningful, because status labels that are too vague create confusion. If a change is marked in progress, teams need to know what that means, whether implementation has started, whether testing is underway, and whether verification has been completed. If a change is marked approved, teams need to know whether approval includes security requirements or whether security review is still pending. In cloud security environments, tracking is especially important because changes can be frequent and automated, and a small status mistake can hide a risky change until it causes a problem. Clean tracking therefore emphasizes accuracy over optimism, because optimistic statuses create false confidence and reduce urgency when action is still required. It also emphasizes timely updates, because stale tracking causes teams to waste time chasing information. A well-managed tracking system becomes the single reference for what is happening, which reduces the number of side conversations and reduces the chance that critical decisions happen without visibility. That visibility is a security advantage because it reduces surprise and supports faster response. Coordination and tracking also reduce the likelihood of change-driven incidents by improving handoffs between teams. Many incidents happen at handoffs, such as when one team believes another team will update monitoring, or when a security requirement is communicated verbally but never incorporated into the actual change plan. Clean documentation prevents this by recording requirements and expected safeguards in the change record. Clean tracking prevents it by showing whether those safeguards were actually completed before closure. Handoffs become safer when the change record clearly indicates what each team is responsible for and what evidence is needed to confirm completion. This also reduces rework because teams do not have to revisit the same decision repeatedly. A beginner might think this is just project coordination, but it is directly tied to security posture because missing a handoff often means missing a control. When handoffs are clear, control implementation becomes more consistent, and consistency is what prevents drift. Another reason coordination matters is that changes often need to be scheduled around business operations and risk tolerance. A security control might be necessary, but implementing it at the wrong time can cause disruption that triggers unsafe emergency behavior. Coordination helps by ensuring that maintenance windows are planned, that stakeholders understand impact, and that support coverage exists during implementation. It also helps ensure that communications are ready. So if an unexpected issue occurs, teams know who is on call and how escalation will happen. Beginners sometimes view scheduling as purely operational, but scheduling is a security factor because it influences whether changes are performed carefully or rushed. When changes are rushed, mistakes increase, and mistakes can create vulnerabilities or outages. Coordinated scheduling therefore reduces both security risk and operational pain, which is why it is one of the most practical ways to improve posture without buying new technology. Clean documentation also supports learning because it allows the organization to review what happened after a change, especially when a change caused an incident or near miss. If an incident occurs, the organization can examine the change record to see what assumptions were made, what safeguards were expected, and what verification was performed. This helps identify whether the failure was technical, procedural, or coordination-related. Without clean records, incident reviews become memory-based arguments, which rarely lead to improvement because people remember different things and defend themselves. With clean records, the organization can be honest about what failed and can adjust processes to prevent recurrence. This learning loop is essential in cloud security environments, where change volume is high and improvements must be iterative. Documentation is therefore not just about proving compliance. It is about enabling better future decisions by preserving the organization's memory. When memory is preserved, the organization becomes less surprised over time. Managing tracking cleanly also involves controlling the life cycle of change records so that they are opened, updated, and closed in a disciplined way. If records are closed too early, issues can be marked as resolved before verification is complete, which leads to reopenings and loss of trust. If records are never closed, tracking becomes cluttered and teams stop paying attention because everything looks unresolved. Clean lifecycle management means closure criteria are clear, verification is completed, and outstanding actions are either finished or formally accepted as residual risk with a defined review date. In cloud security, where systems can be rebuilt and configurations can drift, closure should also consider whether the change is reflected in baseline templates so that the fix persists. This prevents the pattern where a change is implemented once and then undone by automation later. When closure is disciplined, tracking becomes a reliable picture of reality rather than a hopeful story, and that reliability is what makes leaders willing to trust the process. As we bring this lesson together, coordinating stakeholders and managing change documentation and tracking cleanly is about creating a shared, reliable system for making and recording risk-related decisions. Coordination ensures the right people are involved at the right times, decision rights are clear, and handoffs do not create control gaps. Clean documentation captures the essential facts of what changed, why, what risks were considered, and what safeguards were required, in a way that can be understood quickly under pressure. Clean tracking keeps those records alive by showing status, ownership, and timelines, making progress visible and preventing work from disappearing into side conversations. Together, coordination and tracking reduce change-driven incidents by reducing misunderstanding, reducing rushed action, and ensuring that security requirements are implemented and verified before changes are considered complete. They also make organizations more resilient because when something goes wrong, responders can quickly understand recent changes and make better decisions. This is how change control becomes both faster and safer, and it is how security becomes embedded in the organization's daily flow of delivery without becoming a constant source of friction.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.